my name's Dave Loomis, and I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for Regulatory Policy Studies here at Illinois State University. The Institute was founded in 1997 with a threefold purpose: to support our master's degree program in electricity, natural gas, and telecommunications economics, to do public education and outreach, and to do applied research in public policy matters. As part of our education and outreach mission, we've created these video podcasts. And each month we're going to sit down with a key policy decision maker in Illinois that helps shape the innovative regulatory environment that we have here in Illinois. So I hope you enjoy each one. Thank you.
Jackie, thanks for coming and talking with us today. Tell us a little bit about your background, your current title, and kind of where you've come in your career.
Well, my current title is Senior Director of Regulatory Affairs for Ameren, Illinois. And I started my career with Illinois Power Company about 26 years ago in the rate department as a rate analyst, and quickly moved to the economic development area of the company to attract businesses to not only the state, but also to Illinois Power's territory. And then moved back into the rates and regulatory area and had some responsibility for managing cases before the Illinois Commerce Commission, working with the Illinois Commerce Commission staff, and eventually moved out of that area and went into the pricing group and worked on special contracts for our customers. And in the marketing area for a short period of time, I was a key account executive, and then moved in to take the role as manager of regulatory affairs for Illinois Power Company, with the key responsibility of working with the commissioners as well as the senior policy advisors and the Commerce Commission staff. Took a short stint out into the field as the manager for the Danville region. Learned a lot out in the field, and what a great opportunity. Then moved back into regulatory affairs for Illinois Power Company, and at that particular point in time I was director over regulatory affairs. That's at a point in time when Dynegy purchased the company, and then under Dynegy continued as director of regulatory affairs, and then Ameren purchased Illinois Power from Dynegy, and I've continued in the role.
So when you were in Illinois Power and during the building of the Clinton nuclear power plant, and then subsequent to that, that was became, due to a lot of different factors, a big say burden on the company in terms of financial drain and so forth. Were you in the rates department, or were you in one of your stints outside of the rates regulatory area?
Well, in 1988, when I started with the company, we were trying to get the Clinton Power Station into rate base.
Okay.
So I had some experience in that particular area. We took a couple of hits in that particular case. Kind of turned the corner with the power plant for some period of time until we ran into some issues and ended up selling the plant.
And when you were, especially as we think about those who are unfamiliar with that kind of era of as we were nearing regulatory plants coming in to service, some changing regulations that were there due to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Can you describe kind of what were the pressures that the company was facing at that time in terms of all the different regulatory bodies that you had to be accountable to?
Well, I think when I look back at the point in time when we were building that power plant, you had 3 Mile Island, which then created a lot of regulatory requirements that you then had to build into the construction of the power plant. So it caused a lot of cost overruns, and not because of what the company did, but the environment that we were faced with. So that was not easy for the regulators nor our customers to understand.
Do you remember when you then sold the Clinton nuclear power plant? Did it go directly to Exelon Nuclear, or was there an intermediate step in that?
There was an intermediate step in that particular sale. And the reason for the sale of the plant, when you just own one nuclear power plant, it's difficult to be able to operate them efficiently, especially when you have to take them down for routine maintenance. And so it was apparent to our company that the best solution was to sell the plant. And that's what ultimately happened.
And kind of as a result of Illinois having, as a whole, having nuclear power plants, it seems that our rates were higher than the Midwest average, where there was less nuclear power plants that got caught up in that time period post 3 Mile Island and those things. And that, do you think it was nuclear that led to higher rates that led us down the road to restructuring headed towards the 97 Act, or what would you say were the kind of key features that led up to what became the 97 Restructuring Act?
Well, I think not necessarily what went on in Illinois, but what you saw around the nation. So when you see the pressure around the nation for the large industrial customers to want prices to be much lower than what they were experiencing at that particular point in time, that's what led to restructuring in Illinois. There was a case for action when you look at the prices in Illinois, but when you look at what's happening around the nation at that particular point in time with California and their Blue Book, and that's the model that we took when we headed down that path in Illinois.
And it's interesting looking at California versus Illinois. California kind of had a train wreck, and Illinois had some hiccups that could have resulted in a train wreck, but we've kind of moved forward in that process. Maybe we can get to that in a minute, but as you think about the 97 Act, what were kind of from a company perspective, what were the key things that you saw as necessary ingredients for the 97 Restructuring Act for it to be successful at that point for Illinois Power?
Well, at that particular point in time, we felt it was important to have a roadmap. If you sit back and let things just happen for you, then it's not a comprehensive plan. So in our particular instance, we wanted to make sure that we had a comprehensive plan, one that would be successful for not only the utility company but also the customers. And I think that's what made Illinois' Restructuring Act much more successful than the California Blue Book.
And initially, I think there were rate cuts for especially for residential consumers. And I think they started out at, was it 10% and then moved to 15% and then ultimately 20% for ComEd and Illinois Power. How did that progress in terms of the law and getting those rate cuts?
Right. I think that was part of the overall negotiation strategy with all of the parties that were involved. So that was important to the Citizens Utility Board to ensure that the residential customers were able to experience some lower prices during a period when they weren't going to have customer choice for a while. So if you remember the law, it started out with the larger customers having choice first, and so the Citizens Utility Board wanted to ensure that the residential customers got to experience some benefit from the restructuring law. That's how that came about.
Yeah, and early on we did see early signs of first industrial customers and then the larger commercial customers switching, but there were some hiccups along that way where companies then switched back to the utilities and back and forth depending on those pricing. Could you elaborate on what happened there for those larger customers who did switch?
Well, I think for the market to develop and become stable, it doesn't happen day one.
Mm-hmm.
So you're naturally going to see some of those hiccups. And I think that was apparent during those early years.
Mm-hmm.
And customers were hesitant to switch.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot of trust in the utility company that has served them for, 100 years. We've been in the Illinois utility world. So for customers, there's a little hesitancy, even though we assured them that they would still get the service from us, that if there was an outage, they would get restored just like any other customer who took supply from the utility company. So I think in the beginning, you see some of that before the market stabilizes.
Yeah. The RTOs, ISOs started during kind of in that same parallel track, but you could have RTOs in a regulated environment as we have in several surrounding states. But it seems that was very helpful in the having a wholesale market available to competition. Do you think we could have gotten where we've gotten today without kind of the formation of RTOs, ISOs?
I'm not quite sure whether we could or not. I think that the development of the RTOs gave some certainty to the market. I think that maybe customers were concerned without having that independent body overseeing the transmission. So operating those transmission systems. And I think that's what was created, is that element of trust.
Yeah. So they have a sense of a third party that's running the wholesale market and running the transmission grid that they're going to be able to rely on in a similar way that they've relied on the utility for 100 years.
That's correct. And I think a regional approach makes a lot of sense as well. So you approach things from a regional perspective rather than, just the Ameren territory, for instance. So there are a lot of benefits.
Yeah. And so you talked about having a roadmap in the 97 Act. We kind of had a transition period of 10 years with a kind of a clear timelines for starting competition and a lottery system of who was going to get and kind of managed, and then rolling that out to more and more customers to make sure that everything went as planned along those stages. Were there other factors that you saw as critical in addition to that roadmap that was important from a utility perspective?
Yes, I think from a utility perspective, keeping the utility whole. You put power plants in service and they have long lives. And I think that the unspoken agreement is that you're going to be able to recover the costs for those power plants that your shareholders invested in. So keeping the utility whole was a key aspect of that particular bill. And we did that with mitigation factors. So that kept the utility whole, and that was a very important piece of the law.
Yeah. Another piece, and I don't know whether this was who had proposed this, but securitization was also in that in the bill and enabled some cheaper financing than what the utilities were able to borrow at that time. Can you speak a little bit to how that worked and helped make everything move along?
Yeah, that is a particular aspect of the piece of legislation that Illinois Power took advantage of. So that was key in helping us stay whole as well, taking advantage of those low-cost funds that were guaranteed. I think it was the first dollars in the door would pay for those securitization funds. So it was a low-cost option and one that we took advantage of.
Mm-hmm. So we come down the road 10 years, moving along. Customers, we do see customer choice, and customers are switching on the commercial and residential side, but we don't see new areas making big inroads into the residential market during that 10 years. As you look back, what do you think are the factors that led to low entry into the residential market?
I think when you look at mass market choice, it's expensive for third parties to be able to market and to be able to reach those mass markets and with their messages. And, you know, just to get one or two residential customers in any particular neighborhood, very costly.
Mm-hmm.
So during that 10-year period, you really didn't see residential choice happening. Residential customers had choice available in 2002, and not until last year did we actually start seeing some of that switching with the residential markets, and that's because of municipal aggregation.
Mm-hmm.
So that the municipalities can aggregate the residential and small commercial load, and then they can get price offers from a supplier to serve that market. Mm-hmm. So that's when it actually became successful.
When the rate freeze did come off at the end of the 10 years, we had to figure out what to do in terms of providing supply for residential customers who largely hadn't switched and didn't have a lot of companies marketing to them, as you say, and that led to an auction process that then led to very high prices, which then led to big headlines in Illinois. And that's one of those critical junctures where we could have retreated or done things differently. In retrospect, was there, what do you think was the cause of the high prices?
I think with the 97 law, and we rolled prices back from that particular point, and then you froze those reduced prices. And then 10 years later, then you open it up to a market price, you're going to see increases.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened. But also what happened is that we had, for our all-electric customers, we had rates that were lower than even our non-space heat customer rates.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because at a point in time, all of the Illinois utilities wanted to increase their load. Natural gas at one point in time was not abundantly available, and so customers were putting in all-electric heat.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had a reduced rate
Mm-hmm.
for that all-electric household. And so when the rates were no longer frozen, we didn't have a subsidy built in for those all-electric customers who were enjoying those discounts. And so those particular customers' bills in some instances went up substantially. So those are some of the headlines that happened as the result of not just the auction process, but what happened with the all-electric rate.
Yeah. Do you think, in hindsight, that it was that some have blamed the auction itself, the auction mechanism, or the way it was set up in terms of structured with its tranches where you're just going to take a percentage of load as opposed to a well-defined amount of capacity or electricity. If you could redesign it, would you change some of those factors, or do you think it was just kind of those were just small minor details?
Well, I think, we looked at the Maryland auction and modeled after something that was successful. So I think it was from a timing perspective, having rates frozen for 10 years and then coming out of that rate freeze, probably wasn't the best plan. Probably some type of a transition plan would have been better. And also dealing with that all-electric customer issue up front versus what happened ultimately with that group of customers and hitting the headlines.
Yeah. So we kind of have this, cry for a government solution to these large headlines that ultimately ended up in the Illinois Power Agency Act, and rather than going with an auction solution, we create a government agency to help that procurement process. Besides those big headlines, what are the things that led up to that Illinois Power Agency Act?
Well, I think that's pretty much what happened. People blamed the auction for the high prices, when in reality it probably wasn't the auction, but it was just when you have those high prices coming out of that 10-year freeze, that's what happened. So the Illinois Power Agency and the development of that agency, and then how power procurement resulted from the creation of that agency, came about at a time when prices were going down. So it may appear on the face of things that it's a better model, but I think it's a timing issue as well. So there's nothing wrong with either one of those processes. It's just a matter of timing.
Yeah. So we look at the underlying wholesale rates, and we probably had the bad fortune of going and doing the auction as wholesale rates are climbing, and then they reduced by the time we went to the first real procurement by the Illinois Power Agency. Wholesale prices have declined, so it looks better than what the auction results are, even though it may not be the mechanism.
That's correct. Yeah, that's how I see it.
Yeah. There were a lot of different facets to that Illinois Power Agency Act, not just creating the agency itself, but we included the creation of the Renewable Portfolio Standard, Energy Efficiency Portfolio Standard. There was a large reduction or rebate. I'm not sure what we called it in there. There was from what the auction had given. So what were the factors in making up that law? Were there certain folks that wanted certain pieces of that legislation? Was it again kind of a compromise, as in the '97 Act, to try and create that?
Right. It was a compromise piece of legislation dealing with the issues at hand, dealing with the customers who saw large increases in their bills. How are we going to address the all-electric customer? And we entered into a case at the Illinois Commerce Commission on how we were going to deal with that particular issue. So in the end, we continued some discounts for the all-electric residential customers, and that was after the interested parties participating in the case at the Illinois Commerce Commission. But I think that it dealt with many issues, and again, it was a negotiated process, because I think if you remember at that point in time, people wanted us to move back and freeze the rates at the level that they were at during that 10-year period.
Yeah.
And when you have to go to the market and purchase energy to freeze those rates when you no longer own power plants and that type of thing, it is difficult.
Yeah.
So the utilities wouldn't be able to fund that type of initiative. So a lot of parties were involved in that negotiation process as well to come to a logical conclusion.
Mm-hmm. Do you think we've been relatively successful in kind of the post-IPA Act era in terms of kind of navigating that lower rates for consumers, as well as keeping the companies faithful to their stockholders? How have we done in this kind of era?
Yeah, I think we did quite well.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, some states weren't as lucky. If you look at the California model, definitely they had some significant issues, not only for their utility companies, but also for the consumers. So I think from an Illinois perspective, things look good.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back, yeah, we had some hiccups,
Mm-hmm.
but ultimately things have definitely worked out for both the company and its customers. So customers have choice, and they're seeing some lower prices. Whether they go to a third-party supplier or if they take supply service from the company really doesn't care. We don't earn any profit on that supply, so we encourage a successful marketplace.
Mm-hmm. And if you were to look at giving advice to other states, because I think Illinois has been one of those early leaders, and now we've continued through. What do you think, as you look back on several of these acts, what has been the kind of formula for success?
Well, I think, one of the formulas for success is having companies that embrace choice, and I think you've seen that in Illinois. Some companies don't necessarily want to lose their customers to a third-party supplier.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a fear that, I'm not quite sure what that fear is, but I
Mm-hmm.
think they like that intimate relationship with the customer, serving those customers' needs in every way that they can. So I think embracing change has been good for
Mm-hmm.
Illinois and good for Illinois customers.
Mm-hmm.
And also I think, we have good working relationships with the other stakeholders in the state, and we continue to reach out to those stakeholders on various issues.
Mm-hmm.
So that helps with the success that we've seen.
Mm-hmm. And you've seen transition in your own company, as you mentioned, with Illinois Power, them being bought out by Dynegy, and then ultimately with Ameren. And obviously Ameren's the best.
That's correct.
In things. But what was that like? Because you've gotten bigger, you're part of a much bigger company. And the industry itself has experienced a lot of consolidation, but you've seen it firsthand and Illinois Power wasn't a small company. I mean, it was the second largest utility in the state, and I don't know where it ranked nationally, but it wasn't like you started out with a tiny company, but it's grown, and now you're part of a much bigger company. Well, what's that like in terms of the transitions?
Well, I think that if I go back and look at when Dynegy purchased Illinois Power, a little bit different structure. They knew that they were purchasing a utility, but they let us run the utility just like we normally would. So more of a hands-off approach. They were definitely interested in having the company be successful. They were involved in other activities, and they were successful in those activities. So that was a little bit different structure than with the Ameren company, because they owned Union Electric. They purchased Central Illinois Public Service Company first, and Central Illinois Light Company next, and then Illinois Power was the third company in Illinois to join the family. So a little bit different compared to the Dynegy days, but it was a positive experience. when I look back at the Illinois Power days, resources weren't as plentiful. And so we have a larger group that we can pull from with regard to resources to get things accomplished, and a lot of experts within the company as well. So I think it's been a very good move.
That's good. Well, you mentioned starting off your career in at Illinois Power. Did you go into maybe I'll ask you first about your educational background. Did you what was your degree in, and then so your educational background? I know you went back to grad school, but what did you see yourself working for a utility? How'd that happen? How'd you get your first job?
Well, I went back to school when our kids were teenagers. So I was an adult student and graduated from Millikan with a math education degree. And so I was going to go teach math. But when I did my student teaching, it wasn't quite what I had envisioned. So instead, I was going to be an actuary. And my husband was the breadwinner, and so we lived outside of Decatur. And I was getting ready to send State Farm my application. They were going to hire me until I passed the first actuarial exam in a different department. And in the meantime, my husband said, well, Illinois Power Company is in town. Why don't you call them and see if they have a rate department and see if they have any openings? And so I picked up the phone and I called them, and they had an opening, and 2 weeks later I was working for Illinois Power Company.
Wow.
So an interesting way to get a job. It's you're at the right place at the right time, and I hired in as a temporary employee, actually, and it gave me an opportunity to see if it was something I was interested in, and it also gave the company an opportunity to see if they were interested in what I had to offer. So it was a great match. I wasn't expecting to go into the business world, other than, when I decided I wasn't going to teach, I had to decide on what was I going to do with this math degree. And I chose that type of a field, understanding that if I didn't like teaching, is there something that could be a backup? But within the utility company, you have people with all sorts of degrees. You have math degrees, you have economic degrees, you have business degrees. So, there's a lot of different areas that you can go into at the company. Now, what was interesting is I definitely didn't use the math that I learned in college. But I think as a company, they look at an individual's skills and what they bring to the table. And at Illinois Power, they liked my soft skills better than my technical skills. So I've had an opportunity to use both within the company, which has been very nice. But in the regulatory affairs role, I don't necessarily use my math skills.
Yeah. But it is true that especially in regulatory affairs, you while you may not be doing calculus and heavy analysis, you have to have the ability to read very technical material and be able to summarize it and explain it to folks. So it is definitely those soft skills, but you have to have some of the translation skills, I think, as well, to take the really technical people and provide that information. So I'm sure.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. It's using those logic skills, and that's part of math, is the logic. And so using those types of skills are very important. You're not doing calculus, you're not doing differentiated equations. You're not doing those types of things, but you're using those other skills that math is a foundation for to help the organization. And you're right. I spent a lot of time reading testimony and briefs and trying to understand where we want to take the organization and you have to understand then the various components. So you have to have that business acumen, and I think those math skills have helped me tremendously.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you were given advice to a student, or could be a high school student or a college student now that's looking at a possible career in energy, do you think this is a good working for the utility or the energy industry in general? Is this a good career path?
Most definitely, yes. I've been very fortunate. I know that timing was everything with me, starting with the utility company. I honestly had no idea what types of areas that the utility company dealt with. Mm-hmm. And there are so many paths that you can go at the utility company. And it's not a sleepy industry at all. And so, in my opinion, it's an exciting area. The electric and the natural gas business is an exciting area. Opens a lot of doors. It's my opinion, if I'm to give some advice to students at the high school level or junior high school level or even the grade school level, you have to really gain the basics, and you have to get good grades. Mm-hmm. You honestly do. Companies look at GPAs. So you want to pay attention to that in high school, definitely in college, to open the doors that are needed no matter what area you go into.
Mm-hmm. But as you said, those soft skills are also important to be able to deal with people and things. So it does kind of balance out. You have to. You probably got hired into Illinois Power because of your grades, and then you've got your career path because of the soft skills that are there. So
yeah, that's right. That's it's true. Mm-hmm. It was hard for me at first. Mm-hmm. Because when you look at the soft skills, I'm like, but I have a brain. Yeah. So for me at first, it was very difficult. Mm-hmm. But I remember the person that I reported to at the time put it all in perspective for me, and I had a better appreciation for my career path after that. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it just takes that one person that connects with you, and I've been lucky to have that throughout my career.
Yeah. If you look out into the future, to say where we might be 10 years from now, and this could be either general big picture or in Illinois in specific, where do you think we'll be in another 10 years?
Wow, that is a tough question.
I bet if I'd asked you in '97, you couldn't have predicted the IPA Act, and the IPA Act couldn't have guessed where we'd be.
Exactly, 10 years
now.
Seems like such a long time away. I'm not sure where we're going to be at because there are so many unknowns out there. And what comes to mind probably for me right now is, even though we don't own power plants in Illinois, what's going to happen from an environmental perspective? Are the coal plants going to be in existence? And what kind of resource mix are we going to have? You've got some companies looking at building nuclear units, and we thought we were beyond some of the protests with regard to building nuclear units, but I think we're not. I think we're seeing that some of the same people are coming out against nuclear. So, the renewables are a big focus, wind and solar, and I believe we need that in our mix. But I don't think that we can rely solely on the renewables. So where are we headed from a generation perspective? And I'm not sure what the answer to that is. So until some of that is determined, I'm not sure where we're going to be.
Yeah.
On the distribution side of the business, for the utility company, people are looking at distributed generation. What does that mean for the company? And where is storage headed? So depending on where those answers lie, you could see a completely different utility company of the future. But we don't know the answer to that because technology is going to kind of drive some of that.
Yeah. Anything else that I didn't ask you that you would look back and say, yeah, this is significant?
Well, the one thing you didn't ask me about was natural gas, and I can remember taking Carl McDermott's class at ISU, and at the time, you know, the gas bubble was no longer going to be there, and so we were seeing increased prices for natural gas, and then all of a sudden, shale gas, and a way to get that shale gas out of the ground has created the total opposite effect, where we're seeing very low natural gas prices. And in fact, when you look at electric generation, natural gas is on the margin. So it's quite interesting, you know, to think 10 years out, and I think 10 years back, or even further than that, you know, 24 years ago when I took the class at ISU, and we were seeing something totally different on the natural gas side of the business. So I just don't think the future is certain.
Yeah, we may not be able to look out in those 10 years and really say, because there's way too much that takes place in the interim.
Right, that's correct.